Podcast, Cristo Rey Podcast, the Cristo Rey
Corrigan.
Podcast, episode
Mr. Corrigan.
6. What?
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, we all think you're great and everything.
Thanks.
But since this is the last episode of the podcast, why don't you just leave this to us?
Okay.
Some of your favorite student council reps are here.
Brianna Blanks and Nehemiah and Ruby.
That's me.
Hey, how come he never mentions me in the theme song anymore?
Yeah, what's up with that? You got a thing against Nurse Ross? What's your deal?
Seriously, what's your problem?
Podcast,
Cristo
Rey
Rey
Podcast, the Cristo Rey
Podcast, right in your ears.
Podcast, Cristo Rey Podcast.
Hey, it's Mr. Deibel. You want me to start singing too, or no?
Cowboy,
No?
you're in
Okay,
there.
sure.
Okay. Is welcome back to the last podcast episode for the rest of the remaining school year. You are joined by
Ruby.
Nehemiah.
and Brianna. We've also decided to bring some of our friends along, including
Mugumu.
And Vinolia.
to help interview our special guest. So, each podcast we have a really fun question to answer, and today's one pertains towards mental health, it being Mental Health Awareness Month. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being pretty depressed and 10 being perfectly stable, how's your mental health in this quarantine?
Well, I think our special guest, Mr. Zachary Deibel, should answer this first.
Thank you for having me. And I would say my mental health is probably at about an 8. I feel like for the most part, I've been able to manage through. And the fact that I get to communicate and see my students, at least some of my students every day, definitely grounds me back into reality and keeps me going. So in the summer, maybe that'll change when I am no longer here, but we'll see.
Well, that's good. An 8 is a solid number. I feel like for me, it's also like a 7 or an 8. I feel like I'm just very bored at my house and I need some type of distraction from all of this. But I think a 7 or 8.
I probably most definitely agree with like a 7 or 8, except for like right before that AP government test, I was like at a high like 10. I'm like, I'm just gonna fail this because I don't know this material. But then I got to the test. I'm like, okay, Bible over prepared us.
Right, I felt that. Well, not for the test. I think the test I was just like, let's get this done. But like in general, I've been having like an 8, kind of 9, because I made a new friend, so I feel like that kind of helped. But yeah.
I'm at like a 9 or a 10. I'm doing pretty well myself. I'm very happy with myself, and I think this quarantine helped a lot of that, as much as people can complain about it.
I think I'm at like a 6, and it's just because I'm really stressed about our next AP exam. So hopefully when that goes down, I can get back up.
Well, now it's time to formally introduce our guest, Mr. Deibel. So could you give us an overview of who you are and what you do, and feel free to answer any other questions that you had come up beforehand.
Sure. Well, I am Mr. Deibel. I teach government and economics and AP Gov at Cristo Rey. I also head up student council. It's an honor to be on this esteemed program. I only hear positive things about all of this. And for students listening who don't know me, I'm the really loud person on the 3rd floor. Coach track and cross country. And this is my 4th year at Cristo Rey.
4 years going strong. We're going to end the year on a great note. Shifting gears a little bit towards what we're really doing with the podcast, talking more about COVID-19. I have a question. So in what ways do you think that COVID-19 has affected people in the day-to-day life aspect and how they function in society? In what ways do you think it has affected people in general?
I think that's a great question. I think I don't know from what area of expertise I would be talking, but I guess just in my own personal experience and from teaching, One thing I see is a lot of people are willing to be supportive of one another and understanding of one another. I think, you think about the day-to-day sort of interactions of people or things they would normally do in a situation. And I feel like this sort of reality check for a lot of us has made us much more patient and understanding. Yesterday, I was on the call for the senior team meeting, and it was sort of a sad call. I mean, I feel like it was a communication to the senior class of some of the things that unfortunately they weren't going to get to enjoy. And at the end of the meeting, one of the seniors, Marie-Therese, and then a few others chimed in, just took a moment to say thank you and how much they appreciated their teachers and how much they appreciated the staff who, unfortunately, they didn't really do anything. And that was the problem, right? Like, they can't do anything. And so there was a lot of, thank you for all you do. We understand. And there was a lot of empathy in that virtual chat room. And I thought, compare that to a moment when a school administrator has to get in front of a student body and tell them they're not having prom. I don't think there would be a lot of thank yous thrown around. So I feel like that's a good example of, given the circumstances, people are able to kind of step outside of themselves and understand that everyone is facing some hardship. I think it's going to make people a lot more cautious. I think people are already seeing how, thinking about disease and thinking about contracting different illnesses and thinking about spending extended time around people who have chronic conditions. I think we're going to be a lot more careful about how when we think about, are we putting somebody at risk? If I don't feel if I don't feel well, do I not go to work? Even if it's just the sniffles, something like that, is there going to be kind of a shift in mindset about sickness and making sure that people are a lot more careful?
Like, speaking on the fact that you said that it's going to be like different afterwards, what do you think, in your opinion, your new normal life would be, since nothing's going to go back to normal the way it was after this quarantine, because you feel that people might live in fear for like a next pandemic? But in your opinion, what do you think is your new normal coming out of this?
I wouldn't be surprised if schools or universities, we start to see, like Mr. Corrigan was saying in the last podcast, this sort of mixed model where you have some combination of digital and in-person learning. And I think being a PhD student and teaching history to college students, I wouldn't be surprised if I have to sort of elaborate my work with that. For our situation, it was strange just because we had like gotten 3/4 of the way through a school year, and we, for AP kids, all of you are in AP, but we really, all we had left was to start reviewing for the exam. But the idea of having to make, recreate the same sort of deliverables and takeaways that you guys got in your AP class, like, imagine how could we have done that virtually? Would we have been able to do all the things we did, like debates and trials and things like that? And maybe we can't imagine that right now, but it's going to take some creative thought if that becomes sort of the new normal.
You kind of highlighted this in your last couple sentences, but you're talking about you were already planning a big shift and a big change. So I was wondering if you could help our audience know, for those who don't already know, what are you planning for next year?
I guess I want to start by saying, my decision to leave Cristo Rey, first of all, has nothing to do with dissatisfaction or any desire to not teach anymore. I think I came to a pretty clear conclusion over the course of this year in particular that if I were to stay at Cristo Rey for any longer, I might never leave. And I was just incredibly rewarding and meaningful, and I loved every minute of working there and working with all of you. But at the end of the day, I think it's always been a pursuit of mine to sort of advance my education from my mom, who essentially raised my brother, my sister, and me by herself. Unfortunately, she didn't get a chance to graduate college, but she, probably more so than anyone else in my life, sort of reaffirmed the importance of learning and education. And I think that's always been something that has stuck with me. And I think this is the next step in terms of sort of seeing that pursuit through. I also just miss being a student, believe it or not. It's much less stressful to be the student than it is to be the teacher sometimes. And I will give you no further evidence than on Monday when you guys were all taking the test. I was literally like pacing around and like waiting for those 45. And I kept like announcing, okay, they're probably on part B of the free response question. And like, so, you know, I think I'm excited to get back into that student mode. And finally, I think my passion for history and research and doing sort of my own original work. I've kind of tried to maintain that while I've been teaching, but it's become clear to me that in order to do that, I'm going to have to take this other step. So I'm excited to get back into that mode too. I think I did research for my master's degree, and I've worked for a few companies where I've done my own research, but I'm excited to sort of get back into that academic mode. And I mean, all of my years at Cristo Rey certainly shaped my interests. I'm going to be looking at particularly the history of education, and, you know, research projects and things like that change. But for now, it is most likely going to be focused on early American education. So like the first attempts to provide mass education. I mean, just as a brief background, you know, the colonial and early republic era, we see there's pretty massive education of the wealthy and the elite by private institutions like Harvard or William and Mary, or these long-standing colleges founded by the English when they had their colonies here. But I'm interested in seeing what were some of the first attempts to provide education to, you know, a massive amount of people. So whether it was public, you know, citizens in cities or countryside learning, or in particular, I'm interested in efforts that were sort of before their time in terms of educating women in the free Black population in the States in the early republic. So, you know, I think part of all of that is the idea that, as we've talked about plenty of times in class, you know, the preamble says that we're going to be a more perfect union. It doesn't say we are a perfect union, right? And the idea of trying to make things better and improve. And I've always been interested in efforts in American history that try to do that. And I think education is a great example. So that's something that I'm going to be interested in and research. And but I'm sure my time with Cristo Rey and teaching in general in high school will be something that I think about in terms of context when I'm learning all about education and school systems and things like that. So
I've always wanted to know, why did you choose to become a teacher instead of, like, I don't want to be mean, but I feel like you're really overqualified for this job. So why did you choose to be a teacher and teach at Cristo Rey?
I agree with you, Vanolia.
I love when people ask this question, because it implies that I you should be something else. Like, you're not good enough at this. I see how it is, Vanolia. No,
it's a compliment.
I think so I think if you were to go back in time, I always tell this, if you were to go back in time to senior year Mr. Deibel when he was in high school and tell him he was going to become a teacher, he would have said there's like no way whatsoever that I would ever be a teacher. I was very close with several of my teachers, but two in particular, one of whom actually went to my high school with my brother, who also went to my high school. And he was my history teacher. He also ran student government. So a little bit of a mentor in my career. But he would always joke with me that he was like, yeah, you're definitely going to become a teacher. And I was like, no, I'm not. You know, but he called it. I think one of the things that people take for granted is it's a difficult task to think about, how do you help someone understand something, right? And how do you bring someone to the point where they can themselves understand something? It's one thing for me to tell you what the separation of powers is, and you memorize it and you write it down on a piece of paper, but it's something entirely different that I can walk away that knowing that most of my students have a pretty decent understanding of that. And when they encounter someone who doesn't, they're going to explain it to them and they're going to be empowered by that knowledge. And I think to kind of circle it all the way back to what we're facing right now, I think we're seeing that firsthand, that a lot of people are realizing the importance of education and the importance of schools and teaching. You see and you hear all these stories of people trying to teach their kids from home on their own. So I think once those kind of realities were shown to me, it became clear that, the kind of service and the kind of giving back that I had always wanted to do, I found that, in a weird way, I feel like God kind of called me to do that and give back to the community in that way. And so that's sort of how the path led me to teaching.
This is Mrs. Fisher with The More You Know. When Jason Blankson was just a freshman and spent most of his time in the sad and lonely corner in PE class, I was the one who put him there. Little did I know I'd soon become the enforcer for the entire school.
This is Mr. Hickman. When Jason Blankson was at home preparing for his sophomore year, I was loading up in a van headed for Chicago for the Cristo Rey Network new teacher training with
Mrs. Pettit. This is Mrs. Pettit. As Jason Blankson prepares for graduation to head to college, the three of us are preparing for new adventures as well. Mr. Hickman and I are proud to serve as co-principals, your academic leaders.
We're going to be visiting classrooms, shaking your hands every morning.
Mr. Hickman, you won't be able to do that.
Oh, right. Stupid COVID. All right. Making our school a warm and welcoming environment and making sure Jason Blankson has a visitor's badge on when he returns to visit. And Mrs. Fisher
retains her role as security lady and keeper of the detention dungeon. I'll be serving as assistant principal of student affairs. I'll conduct dress code checks and make sure your lockers are secure. Are you listening, Megumi?
We're pumped for next year.
We love you all. Stay safe.
Viva Cristo Rey!
Being an educator thus far, and like how you said, time does fly by really fast. What is like the biggest takeaway in general that you've had being an educator for this long?
I think that a lot of people have a very misguided perception of how like there has to be this kind of timeline of development. So I think a lot of people think, well, you're a kid and you're young and you have all these like, firm beliefs and you believe in these things and you work really hard and you have all these passions and you're ruled by your emotions and all this. And then slowly over time you become an adult and you kind of mellow out and you understand responsibilities of life and you quote unquote grow up. And I think there is some truth to that, I think, for sure. But I think over time I realized that the processing and complex thinking and understanding and creativity of students is very under-recognized. Like I think most teachers walk into a classroom, and I certainly did when I started teaching. Most teachers walk into a classroom and think like, okay, I'm here to tell these kids what to do and teach them, myself, what they know and how they should know it. And I think that's how people view young people in general. Like it's my job to like expose them to the real world and how things really work. And I think the biggest takeaway I've had is that is completely wrong. I think that education, when it is at its best, it is a sharing. It is a conversation. And that's why, that's why I emphasize that so much in class of like debates and discussions and arguments and you guys actually having to come up with what you think. One of the things I always get feedback on in my government class is that they say, I didn't realize you were going to ask me my opinion so much. And, when I ask you, like, what do you think of this policy? Or do you think, what is this a good idea? Now, you can't just say, I think it's a good idea because you have to have evidence and support your arguments, as you all know. But I think the emphasis on like helping students reach their own original thought and having contributions and caring about something, I think that's the most powerful aspect of education, is that it's not just about learning and understanding things. It's about understanding them so you can do something about it. A lot of times we like to think of, oh, well, kids can do this and they can't do that. Well, why don't we let and I found that, why don't we see what kids can do? Why don't we let them decide, and let them show us, and then we fill in the gaps.
I think that's a good follow and transition into our little segment about the evaluation of this conversation. Now, I just want majority of the students in because Mr. Deibel, you've been the one talking, so I don't know how you're going to evaluate yourself. But I would say, as the students, what's some of the biggest takeaways from this conversation? And for me, it's there's a lot more that goes through Mr. Deibel's mind when he goes into teaching than you think, because he was recalling stories from 7 years ago and how it affects his teaching now.
Yeah. I was looking at that. I was like, there's so much that goes into the history teacher's mind specifically. I was thinking of Miss Alimas and Mr. Corrigan. I think a lot of us want to know your opinions because it's not something that we often hear. You can hear it from other teachers, but I feel like the history ones just tend to be more reserved, and we feel like you guys know everything. So it's interesting when we do get to hear your opinion. But yeah, one thing I learned is that we're much more than what we think we are. Even our teachers know that, but we don't tend to see it in our everyday lives. So if you're out there thinking that you can't do anything past a certain point, or if you're reading a document and you believe that it's too difficult, in a sense, you can interpret it little by little and you'll get there. It's possible to understand things like that. We're not just limited to what we believe we can see.
Yeah, I agree, because off of my personal experience, when Mr. Deibel started giving us documents in the beginning of the year, I was like, there's no way I'm going to understand this. This is too difficult for my little brain. And now, when I read these papers, I'm like, oh, I know what it is now. I feel like we shouldn't limit ourselves to something. I feel like we should always try to expand our learning and not doubt ourselves. I feel like doubt is people's worst enemy, and sometimes that's what can, guide you in a way. If you keep doubting yourself, you're not gonna get anywhere. You're not gonna make progress. And if you let that not be a factor in the way you learn and expand your learning, you can do anything.
So my biggest takeaway was that teachers go through a lot. I feel like most of the time students and parents and the people really judge teachers, not understanding that it's hard to teach someone to understand something, and that may be their life story of how they became a teacher and why they did that. Because I have to now teach my siblings at home to help them with their homework, and it is just the hardest thing ever because I don't know how to make them understand. So I feel like my biggest takeaway was definitely be a little easier in teachers, because it's a lot to have to plan how to teach someone, try to make them understand. It's too much. So
my biggest takeaway was that Mr. Deibel and all of them, they always that they're learning something new every day. Even though they're teachers, and Mr. Deibel, you have a master's and hopefully soon a doctorate degree in what you want to do, you're still learning something new every day, even though you're not a student like us, even though you're about to be. I guess the thing is learn. Our parents always tell us to study something we're passionate about, or then we're not going to want to work for something, and we're not going to be happy in the job that we do going out of college. So when you learn something you're passionate about, it all comes together, and it's something you really love to do over time. Like Mr. Deibel said, he's very passionate about history. It's the same thing with all of us. We always keep learning something new every day to build up to something that we're really passionate about.
So mine was what I learned: be a little easier on your teachers, and that's coming from me because I always just the teachers. So I'm be a little easier on your teachers because it's harder than you think, and I don't think you could do the job if you were put up to the task. So be a little easier and try to put yourself in your shoes and try to understand what they're dealing with too.
Except Mr. Corrigan. Keep being tough on Mr. Corrigan. He deserves it.
Oh gosh.
Leave him alone.
Never.
Picking back on what Venolia said, I agree with her, because I feel like we have to also understand that they also have to, in a way, discipline us, and that shouldn't be really what they should be doing. Their job is more of educating us, and we should be a little bit more lenient and sometimes put ourselves in their shoes and kind of recognizing and reflecting on what we could do better as students, because sometimes we do probably stress them out, and we need to just be a little nicer to them.
I just want to take in a different view of what Ruby said. Our teachers are here for you. As much as you think that oh, they're just here to teach us and to grade my stuff, they're actually there to help you. They want for you to learn what they're teaching you, and they want you to take into account everything. And always trust your teacher. If you really don't know, or if you just want to talk to somebody, they're always there as whether like a mentor, just a friend. They're not just your teacher, they're more to that. And I think most students don't see that. And it's like okay to like just go talk to your teacher if you're not confused. They're there for you. They always will be. And so that's my big thing for students.
I would just add to Megumi's and basically everybody's thing and say that's very true, and that we need to understand that, you know, both teachers are human and that students are human, and students actually like being asked that kind of thing because some people just want to talk their things out. And whenever nobody asks, it's like, do I really need to be telling this person all of my information? So it feels nice because I know we don't only pretend like questions towards students, but you know, there may be some teachers who just don't know how to deal with that, or like can even comprehend going up to a student and doing that, like Mr. Deibel. Yeah, so that was one of my things. But like another advice I would say is just to know that whatever is in front of you, you're bigger than whatever it is. So like I was saying before, if there's something in front of you that you don't feel like you can overcome, it just takes a time of like focused and listening, and you'll be able to do it. I feel like it's more towards being able to understand that you have the capability to do all things, the harder that you want it. So I would say follow that advice and see what you get the next thing that you don't understand.
I would say, yeah, I definitely agree with everyone and what they're saying here. I would just say the big takeaway is that we're all humans at the end of the day. We all have the ability to show empathy and compassion. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to build that bridge, you know?
Well, this has been a very productive conversation, and I really appreciate all of you taking the time to come here. But for Mr. Deibel, we have a special message. So
before we end this session, Mr. Deibel, we would like to say one last thing.
Thank you for the times you would say quiz in a funny way.
For the times in which you would say that you'd be single for the rest of your life reading Federalist Papers with your dog.
We will miss hearing your somewhat funny puns and jokes, and we hope nothing but the best for this new chapter in your life.
You'll do great. Good luck on your future endeavors. We believe in you.
We will miss you, and stay tuned for next year's podcast. Yay!
Hey! I'm here. Sorry, I got kicked out of the Google Meet somehow at the beginning. Someone changed the code too. It was almost like they were trying to keep me out or something.
Oh, that's weird.
Anyway, it's okay because I'm here now, and the students they wouldn't let me sing the song at the beginning, but I'm sure they want me to sing it at the end. So here goes.
Hang on, hold on, Mr. Corgan. Hold on. Stop. I have to stop you.
What? Okay. Why?
It's about the theme song. I've been trying to find a good way to tell you, but the song is
awesome.
No, it's terrible.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, you know, if you felt this way, why didn't you say something before?
I just didn't want to upset you. You know, I thought you might challenge me to a duel or something.
Well, I mean, it's okay. It's fine. You know, it's pretty terrible. Now I think about it. I mean, I don't need to sing. It's fine. It's fine.
You're sure?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you know, we've been through a lot, you and me, and it's good that we can be honest with each other.
I agree.
And since we're being honest with each other, the bow ties.
What about the bow ties?
Oh, nothing. I think they're neat.
Neat?
Totally. The beard too. It's rad. Makes you look really hip.
Okay. I get it.
Hey, you know, we have been working together a long time, you and I, and over the years, if we're being honest, I have come to think of you as more than a colleague, but almost a friend.
Almost?
Hey, let's not go crazy. No, in all seriousness, it is going to be a shame to break up the old team, but if this whole COVID-19 quarantine has taught me anything, it's that physical distance doesn't matter that much. The true friendship finds a way.
You know what? I agree.
Yeah, I think that even though we won't be working together day by day anymore, I have a feeling that the future still has something in store for Mr. Deibel and good old Mr. C.
You might just be right.
I know I'm right. You know, just thinking about it, it sort of puts a song in my heart.
Oh no. Wait a minute. He's gonna sing.
Like the wallpaper sticks to the wall.
Like the seashore clings to the sea.
Like you're never getting rid of your shadow, Mr. Deibel. Now you're never getting rid of me.
Let all the others fight and fuss. Whatever happens, we've got us.
We're closer than pages that stick in a book. We're closer than ripples that play in a brook. Wherever you'll find him, you'll find me. Just look. Closer than a millennial to her bandwidth, or Kim Jong-un with his sandwich meat.
We're closer than smog is when it comes to LA. We're closer than Jay-Z is to Beyonce.
Ouch!
And not a soul can bust this team in two. We stick together like glue. And when it's sleeping time,
that's when we ride.
We start to swing.
The swing to the sky.
Our clocks don't chime.
What a surprise. They ring. A ding ding, Happy New Year.
Me.
And now to repeat what I said at the start.
I shall.
Don't need a large crowbar to break us apart. Oh, we're alone but far from blue.
And before we get finished, we know this is true. We'll wander the hallways to pick up our crew. Gotta get Shoemaker and Mr. Wing too. Life is gonna be a wee wah wee. Like the Constitutional Convention. For